Humility is one of the most important qualities which you must have. Because if you are humble, if you make people realize that you are no threat to them, then people will embrace you.
Welcome to the Fidelis Leadership Podcast, a place of learning for those who aspire to leadership excellence. Here's our host, Mike Etor.
Elizabeth Pearson is an executive career coach who specializes in helping women navigate job changes, find a path to success in male-dominated fields, and launch their own companies. In addition to being a career coach, Elizabeth is the author of Career Confinement: How to Free Yourself, Find Your Guides, and Seize the Fire of Inspired Work, where she shares practical ways to shift your mindset to seize your full professional power and potential. She is a contributor to Forbes, Entrepreneur Magazine, Yahoo, hermoney.com, and has been an expert guest on national networks, including CNN. I've been stalking Elizabeth a little bit on social media lately. She's got some really good content and some insights out there. And I'm just so pleased that you're here today. Elizabeth, welcome to the Fidelis Leadership Podcast.
Thank you for having me on, Mike. I'm excited to get into it and have a solid chat.
Well, let's get into it. Thank you. So very brief intro, really robust, impressive career. What more do we need to know about Elizabeth?
I think a big piece of this is that I'm a parent. I think it's really interesting. You know, we can have the biggest LinkedIn profiles with all of these letters and accolades behind our name, but the underlying other full-time job is being a parent. So I am a mom. I've got a 12-year-old and an 8-year-old. I've got a loving husband, but those children are a big piece to motivate me to do all of those things that you just listed off.
Yeah. Well, as a grandfather and a parent of 4, I'm just going to give you some parenting advice off the cuff, Elizabeth. Your children are still young, and so they still listen. Oh, mom and dad are so smart. That 12-year-old, in about 2, 3, 4 years, you guys aren't going to be smart enough for her. You know, she's going to go away for several years. And when I say that, she's going to be there, but it's like, oh, mom, you know. And then around age 20, it's like, you know,
they come back.
Mom actually knows what she's talking about, you know. So just remain patient during that away phase, you know.
Yeah. Thank you for that insight. I am prepared for it.
Yeah, it's easier said than done. Okay. And of course, if we reflect back on our parents, I know I did that for sure.
Yeah, you know, I did too. I remember my mom saying stuff and being like, she doesn't know what she's talking about. I remember standing at the counter thinking this woman doesn't have the slightest idea. So I am somewhat prepared.
Yes. Well, listen, I always ask this right up front. What does your company do? Who are your clients? What problems do you help them solve, Elizabeth?
Yeah, my company really helps relieve the pain point for women who are trying to grow in leadership positions. I do work with men, but it's pretty selective. There's a selective few. Most of the men that I work with are managing women or leading women, which is wonderful, right? They want to get some insight into what that experience is like for people that they lead. But really, it's about helping people either break through career plateaus or make a big pivot. So a lot of times I just put it under the banner of people feel stuck. They feel like maybe they could be doing better. Maybe something isn't quite as good as it could be, but they're not sure how to fix it themselves. So they work with me to try to resolve what are those things, what are those maybe subconscious blocks or maybe real physical environmental blocks, keeping them from rising to higher leadership positions.
Yeah, awesome. Well, I always ask this question as well. If, you know, I was stalking you on social media, we didn't have this conversation. I saw you somewhere and I introduced myself, but I only have 3 minutes. You're like, Mike, I got to go in this meeting. I'll say, okay, look, could you just show me, net it out? What's your leadership philosophy, Elizabeth? What would you answer in a very abbreviated executive summary way?
I really feel like good leaders have the ability to see and have empathy and value for the people that they're working with. And I think that a lot of people can say that, but it's very different when you act that way and you manage that way. So what I'll do with people is really kind of ensure that they're putting themselves in the shoes of the people that they're working with. I think you can gain a lot by adjusting your point of view.
Yeah. Yeah. Excellent. Well, I always have to ask you the timeless question, and there's no right or wrong answer to it, but I want to hear what your thoughts are. Leaders, born or made?
I think they're made. I think it's a lot of it goes into conditioning. I think, you said yourself as a parent, it's what are we told as we're growing up? Is it, wow, you're so smart, you can do anything? Or, you're not good at that. Why don't you lean into something else? So I think that they're made. I think that some part of it is instinctual. I'm a big fan of human design. If you guys don't know what that is, Google it. I'm happy to get into that. I'm a big fan of like zodiac signs. I think sometimes you're just cosmically more equipped to lead. But I also think a huge 75% of it is environmental.
I absolutely agree. It sounds like what you're also saying, and don't let me put words in your mouth. I agree that almost everybody here says they're made. First, do you agree that leadership is a learned skill? And then secondly, do you also agree that some people seem to be born with an aptitude or innate ability to where they're almost born with the freshman and sophomore years of leadership embedded in them? However, if they don't work hard to develop it and continue it, the people born with zero leadership college credits, they can overtake them pretty quickly, because I think it's a learned skill. I want to hear your thoughts on this.
I totally agree with everything that you just said. And I do feel like some people might have an internal drive that might push them a little harder. Maybe they were never going to be somebody who was going to be content in maybe not even middle management, but lower than that. I'm sure you and I are both
Yeah.
those people. I always had
Yeah.
big dreams to the point where sometimes I would share them with my family and they would straight up laugh. It was like, okay, yeah, we'll see when that happens. And I think some people can either cower and say, oof, okay, maybe I'm actually not supposed to do that, or you turn it into fuel. So I do think that some of those people are more born, but I also agree that even if you aren't born with that and you just rest on your laurels that, oh, I'm a good leader and everybody's told me I'm a good leader my whole life, somebody can absolutely just blow by you if they have more motivation to make more money or have some sort of bigger impact on their organization. So I think it's a mix. It's kind of exactly how you broke it out. Is a lot of it
Yeah.
is what you tell yourself and how you choose to utilize resistance that comes your way along that journey.
Yeah, well said. Well, listen, I want to get into your book a bit. And again, I'm reading this now so I don't screw it up. Your book is titled Career Confinement: How to Free Yourself, Find Your Guides, and Seize the Fire of Inspired Work. Hell of a title, if I say so myself. Unless it inspires me, I'm just reading it, I
Yeah.
haven't read it yet, but with a title like that, I have to buy it. It's like, oof,
Yes. I'll
I'm all
send you a
about
signed
getting
copy.
fired up. Oh,
Yeah.
thank you so much. So why did you write the book, and what audience is it aimed at?
I wrote the book because, as you're aware, not everybody can financially afford to work one-on-one with a coach. And for me, group coaching, I wasn't getting the same impact. Personal fulfillment, aside, I feel like one-on-one was really my sweet spot. And a lot of people don't have 5 or 6 figures laying around to invest in coaching. So I really wanted to be able to provide a resource that for $15 or an Amazon Audible credit, people could really start to motivate themselves and feel like they had a significant toolbox to utilize. A lot of the stuff in that book, I mean, everything is taken from the one-on-one coaching that I do with executives. So that was really the need. It wasn't about, oh, I just want to, I have a personal goal of writing a book, because anybody who's written a book knows if it's a good book, it's not easy. This was a 5.5 year process. I got denied by
Yeah.
publishers left and right. That title was changed a million times. I had 5 different book proposals out there, which are grueling to write. So it wasn't like I just wanted to write a book. It was really because my heart would break when I would talk to women and they were like, I so want to work with you, but I can't afford it. And And if I would have just worked with everybody who wanted to work together and I lowered my rates to within their budget, I would have no personal life. It would really impact the quality of coaching that they got. So I felt like there has to be a resource out there. So what I did was distill 13 client stories into the book so that women and men can identify with the pain points that those clients were having. And then they can follow along and utilize tools from the process that I used with those clients to help themselves.
Yeah, outstanding. Well, you're talking about these 13 stories, I believe you said. Yeah. And so that leads into my next question. I would assume that those 13 stories have some unique points and then some points that are in common that span all 13. Can you tell me if so you're nodding your head, so apparently that's, I guess, correctly. What are some of the most important topics or situations or concepts that the book covers?
It's such a great question, Mike. I've never been asked that question. And it's a really good one
Really?
because you would think, well, all the times I've been interviewed about this book, somebody would have phrased it that way, but nobody has. And there is a common thread among each story. And I really feel like at some point, all of these women started to doubt themselves. They took a comment that a boss made about them or a mother-in-law or a friend or somebody made, and it's almost like they dropped a little pin in their brain. And it said, oof, I'm not good at giving presentations, or I'm not good at Excel, or I'm not good at managing more than one or two people. And unfortunately, when we kind of drop that pin in our brain, it becomes part of our hardwiring. And we revert back to it anytime we feel a little threatened or uncertain or insecure. So what we had to do for each of these clients was kind of go in and find those little pins that had been dropped that were no longer accurate. And frankly, Mike, they probably never were accurate, right? It was one a-hole's opinion of them that they said in a meeting, or they got cut off, or they got kind of like checked or knocked down a peg, if you will. And they internalized it, and that became their default. So we had to go back through and kind of clean up the pins, if you would, and then really try to get them to realize what their soul had been trying to tell them, which was either you deserve better, or, you know what, you're climbing the wrong mountain. A lot of us out of college default into some sort of career, right? Like you went to the Marines, like other people can go to other places. For me, I defaulted into sales, which I turned out loving, but not everybody's that lucky, right? You could just default into something and then you blink and it's like 5 years later and you're like, oh my God, I didn't choose this. Like it chose me, but I'm 5 years deep. I'm starting to make a little bit of money. So it'd be crazy to pivot now. So what I tell people is it's crazy to stay there. It's far less crazy to make a pivot. And I feel like all our careers, it should not be a linear line. It should be a portfolio, and we should be constantly pivoting and like getting out of our comfort zone. So I started in beverage sales, and then I went to snack food sales, and then I wanted to do health and beauty. So I went to luxury skincare, and then I went to coaching. Like, I think it should be more of a zigzag, and everybody's really stuck on climbing a ladder, which is linear. So it was really about working with each of those clients and understand, like, where do we actually want to go? Where does your soul want to go?
Yeah, I love it. I want to go a little deeper on that. You said a lot there. I want to unpack it a little bit. I totally agree with you. You're in something, you're not really passionate about it. I'm going to get out. Next thing you know, you say 5 years. I know people that next thing you know, 20 or 30 years have gone by. And they always look back and said, when I had my first gut feeling that this wasn't for me and I might want to do something different, I should have acted on it then, but I didn't. What are your thoughts on this, Elizabeth? As far as I always tell young people to make sure they have enough money stacked up that gives them the freedom to make those choices. You know what I mean? I call it their emergency fund. The easiest way, I think, and I want to ask because I think we have a lot of younger people on this podcast, and as I understand it, they are there. The younger millennials and Gen Zs do not look at the career path like I was. I'm a boomer, and I was raised by Depression era people, and they were like, no, you get a job and you stay there for life. Jobs are hard to come by. And of course, they remember the Depression in the 30s and 40s where we don't know where we're going to eat next, that kind of stuff. As I understand that the most younger slices of the workforce, they want to try a career of many careers. What are you going to be doing 10 years from now? I don't know, as long as I'm adding value to society and I feel fulfilled and all of that. But one thing remains constant. I'm getting to the meat of it here. They still have bills. They still have student loans, car, maybe even now a child and a mortgage. And I say the more of those bills that you accrue, it kind of turns the faucet on your ability to even envision taking the leap. Because as you know, sometimes taking the leap means leaving security and starting over again in a new industry. So I want to get your thoughts and your advice to the younger folks about, or first of all, reinforce taking the leap, and secondly, some enablers that they can do to make that leap doable. So they will never sit there and say, "I'd love to do it, but I don't know where next month's mortgage payment is coming from." So enough of me
Yeah.
babbling. I'd like to get your
Yeah.
thoughts on it.
Well, I want to just reiterate kind of what you said there with like generational differences. And I agree. I think I am an elder millennial, so I like barely make the cutoff for a millennial. But I feel like elder millennials and Gen X and boomers, it was all almost like musical chairs. And as soon as the music stopped, you grabbed a chair. And that was career, that was a spouse, it didn't really matter what chair it was or what song was playing. You just grabbed and you held on and you hoped that you were going to be able to, create a life where you could take your family out to eat on the weekends, right? And so it was a very different expectation. And I think this all comes from our parents, right? Like, if there's one thing we've realized is that like a lot of this stuff happens when you're a child, and it's not to blame parents because they had it worse off, likely. I mean, it's just all what we're taught to take as good enough. And what's wonderful about these new generations, as you just explained, is that they're questioning, is this what I want? Do I even want that? Like, or do I want to go live in a camper van and be a nomad and then just, use my laptop to answer some emails while I'm waiting to surf? I think that there has to be some sort of middle ground where you're not necessarily running from responsibility and having zero financial nest egg for your future, but you're also not completely chained to a desk and on for 10 hours a day, and you're just scrambling, eating some nuts as lunch, in between these calls. There has to be some sort of middle ground. And what's
Yeah.
really interesting is that at some point as we age, we see that time is more valuable than money. And I think that the younger generations are starting off with that as their roadmap, right? My time is more valuable, so therefore that is the freedom that I crave. But yes, there's mortgages. And right now, God, I mean, I would hate to be trying to buy a property for the first time right now. Like the odds are stacked against you. So what I say is, if you can find a job that maybe you're not skipping to every day, but it's not something that you dread. You're not getting Sunday scaries. I mean, I've had clients before who get abdominal pains so bad on Sunday
Yeah.
nights that they can't get out of bed because they
Yeah.
just do not want to go to work. Like, that's unacceptable. If it is really taking a physical and mental toll on your health, it deserves some examination. But I think that you can kind of create, I call them these lily pads, right? Like, maybe there's somewhere you want to go and it's a huge pivot. I don't think you just like burn the boats where you are and try to make that huge leap. Let's just hop on a lily pad a little bit closer, right? So say you're in marketing or say you're in sales and you don't love it. Okay, well, so if you're in sales, is it the product that you don't love? Is it the industry? Like, for me, I was done with beverage, right? Like, I was like, ugh, bored, done. You know what I mean? Let's try something else. But I didn't dislike sales. I actually loved client success, client retainment. I loved not having huge teams under me. I was in national accounts, so it was me and the buyers, and I loved that. I didn't mind the travel. So I would always say, like, kind of like wade through and make a list of things that are energy drains and fills about your job. So what is a fill? Maybe it's that you have, some really high-end travel for work and you get hotel points and all that stuff. Okay, that's a fill. A drain could be filling out weekly recaps or some sort of tracker or something that you just feel like is beneath you. And then go through and see which of those you can swap out or offload and have a discussion with your boss about it. but you need to have the money. You know what I mean? Like, don't just throw up your hands and say, worst case scenario, I'll move back in with my parents. Like, that should not be an option.
Right. Right. Yeah. And I agree to that point, and then we'll move on. But I tell people, and I told this to my own children. In fact, I told this to people when I first got in the corporate world, because I had to take this advice. I came from the Marine Corps, military folks don't make a lot of money.
Right.
And so we mentioned before, discussed during the pre-call here about I joined a company that was really full of good people, but we almost went out of business during the dot-com crash. I mean, I saw our stock go from $32 to $1.55. We got a
Yikes.
letter from the NASDAQ saying, you go under $1 for 5 days in a certain month, we're going to delist you. You're a penny stock. And so I saw that, and I remember telling my wife, we're getting a new house built. I'm like, well, I'm not sure we're even going to have a company next quarter. And so I was already in the process of saving. And before you knew it, I said, we could do 3 months without a dollar coming in. We could make it, even with the new house being built. And then it turned into 6, and then 9. And before you know it, I had 12 to 18 months. And once I hit 12 months of, okay, we might have to shut off cable TV, but we're not going to have to eat, TV dinners or something, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
We'll be okay. And it was very empowering to me because I worried less about things that I could not control. The only thing I could control was acknowledging the fact that we were in trouble and that my job might end, the company might end. And so don't be a dummy and say, I guess I should have saved some money and all of that. And
Yeah.
so I would like to get your input. I tell people, look, don't look so far out that, well, geez, it's going to take me forever to get a year's worth of money stashed behind in me so I could go a year without. I just say, start with a month.
Yeah.
And then next thing you know, just keep saving, start with 3 months, live tight for a while. And before you know it, it's like, well, the good news is I still have my job. I like it. And I've got all this money saved up on the side.
Yeah.
Because you just never know when the situation is going to change. Different boss, environmental, COVID, whatever that happens. Any thoughts on the amount of money they need for that emergency fund?
I'm sure there are financial analyzers out there who will
Yeah.
give a better answer than I could. But from my own experience, I think some people always want to go out on their own or don't. And I was one of those people who someday was going to do my own thing, right? And I think that's why I was drawn to working for smaller startups, because it helped kind of scratch that entrepreneurial itch on a certain level. And so I had always my husband and I had always known that was going to happen. And we worked with a financial advisor. And I think, it was 5 years of planning, right? And that's not the huge, we didn't have like a 5-year nest egg, but it was always getting my mind around, okay, at some point, this paycheck is going to go away, and be prepared for that. And I watched, all those like Grant Cardone and Jesse Itzler, and I have mad respect for those men, and Ed Milet, like, used to live like down the road, and they're great. But I don't subscribe to the don't get your $5 Starbucks, because for me, I'd rather shut off cable, like you said. I think you should still have little pleasures. I think that you should streamline them so they're one a day. You know what I mean? Don't have $15 worth of Starbucks or then go to Chipotle for lunch. But if that coffee brings you joy, and that's something you can look forward to, and it can be a reward, for doing your workout in the morning or meditating before you sit down, tie some sort of reward. I walk to Starbucks each morning, and it doesn't, I have the pleasure of living in Southern California. So today it was 40 degrees, but for us, that's cold, right? But I don't get that Starbucks unless I walk there. And it's a 3.5-mile round trip walk, but I wake up at 5 and I do it. Otherwise, I'm not getting it. But either way, I'm getting the Starbucks, right? So I think you can build in these things as rewards that maybe currently you don't have set as rewards. Maybe it's just, oh, that's just what I do. Well, no, make it a reward for making a website for yourself or something, right? But don't subscribe to that, live like a peasant for a year mentality, because it sucks all the joy out of it. And I think, Mike, when you're not happy and you're really being cheap with yourself, your vibration lowers, and then you can't manifest all that amazing stuff that's up here waiting for you, because you're in a poverty mindset. So I think like be smart about it, but don't go into a scarcity or poverty mindset. You always have to just focus on make more money. Like, yes, save, but my motto has always been, I guess we got to make more money. You know what I mean? It's not, we better
Yes.
really pull back. No, we're going to keep living our lifestyle. I'm just going to make more money.
Yeah, I love what you said. I agree entirely. I don't know if this advice is still current, but for decades, me following various financial planners and all of they advise everybody to have at least 6 months living
Yeah.
expenses. And of course, before they have 6 months, that implies they have 1 month, 2 month, 3 months. I also agree, and we're both not trying to send a message to anybody out there that now is perked up with this portion of the podcast. We are not espousing that you live like hermits.
Yeah.
Like live, just reuse everything, never get anything new, never go to the movies. Life's pretty dull about that.
Yeah.
And I want to get your thoughts on this. 2 points. I have found, I was in the employment industry for 15 years, staffing. And so I'm somewhat connected to the employment world. The good news and the bad news. The bad news first is younger folks, junior in corporate America, typically are on the lower end of the salary ranges of corporate America in their industry. It's a fair statement. It's a generalization. I'm not talking about the whiz bang young Elizabeth who goes and lights up sales, because sales, as you know, is a different beast, and you can make a lot of money in sales. It's all, based upon your own
Yeah.
initiative, timing, and all of that. But I think that I want to encourage young people and get your thoughts. Should the worst happen and you lose your job, there is a heck of a lot more jobs out there, 60K, 80K, 90K, 45K, than there is 145K, 225. Those jobs take a long time to get into, usually non-sales jobs. And
Yeah.
they are not a dime a dozen. And so it takes the more senior people way longer. So it implies they need much more of a cushion and all that. So I see you nodding your head on that. I want to get your thoughts on that. And then secondly, you've implied it and I've implied it as well. Last thing on this, escaping or maybe not the last thing, but escaping the traps and all of that. It implies the need, and I find most people are not good at this, to really cultivate and nourish a robust professional network.
Yeah.
Because if
For
you
sure.
want to make a move, chances are your resume is just going to a bot. HR never sees it. It's a bot. Well, it doesn't have these words. It's out of here and all of that.
Yeah.
I always
For
tell
sure.
people resumes don't get you jobs. Connections do. Your network gets you interviews. At that point, the resume is kind of formality. So I'm looking for your advice on both of those.
Yeah, I agree. I don't know about you. I think I was making 24 grand a year when I was working for Vitamin Water, and they asked me to move from St. Louis to Chicago. So I was paying $800 a month. This was, back in 2005, like $800 a month for rent. I mean, I didn't have two pennies to rub together. I
Yeah.
was a woman, so I could go out, and if I wanted to have fun at a bar, people would buy me drinks or whatever, but I was cheap. There was no extra each month. So I get it. People who are living paycheck to paycheck, it feels very scary and it feels very uncertain. But what I really focused on, to your point, it was the network. It was really impressing not only my boss, because I felt like my bosses were kind of there was more turnover, I feel like, at that layer than there was C-suite and the actual founders. So I really focused
Yeah.
on standing out, having a high visibility and a voice with the founders. So that meant at national sales meeting, I would walk right up to this guy, Mike Rapoli, who's a billionaire, right? And at the time he wasn't, but I would introduce myself. I would tell him accounts that I had just opened. I would tell him, what I thought of the brand. Here's something that I think that we could tweak. And I stood out. And guess what? That dude brought me along every time he went and bought a new company and grew it to sell. I was part of that core team that went with him, because he knew it wasn't about me just complaining about you're not paying me enough or I'm doing this or that. It was about, I'm going to do right by
Yeah.
you. And it was making an investment in those relationships. And now these people
Yeah.
are on the back of my book, you know what I mean? Vouching
Mhm.
that I'm solid. And so it doesn't just end. I think a lot of people, it's like, what have you done for me lately? And if somebody hasn't done anything for them lately, they just kind of cast them out of their network. They don't keep that relationship going. But to your point, these are the people that are going to get you in the door. So I always say, like, hey, out of the blue, write somebody a LinkedIn recommendation. It could be a boss you haven't worked for in 3 to 5 years, but everybody loves to hear nice things written about themselves. It's free. It takes a moment, and it's this wonderful evergreen thing that will live on their profile. You can write about what great leadership they had, or what a great boss they were, or how they were always very empathetic because you were a single parent, whatever. Like, write something nice. I think people go to LinkedIn with their hands out, like, can you help me with this? No, dude, you got to do for them first. So I even have people reach out to me and they're like, can you do this? And I'm like, yeah, but do you see, like, I would have, if you would have done something for me, as small, whatever it is, if you would have posted on my book or something, now I feel like almost indebted to do something for you. And people aren't doing that. They're just walking around with their hands out, like nudging people, can you write me a recommendation? And I'm like, but have you written one? Like, you need to do it first. So I always say, like, pay up front in these relationships. And you're right, it's the network, but it's also your personal brand. There are some people that are still not hip to LinkedIn, and they're not taking time to update their profile. They're not taking time to post on LinkedIn. They're not adding hyperlinks. They're not writing recommendations. They're not volunteering. They're not doing these things. And I think you're really missing out. Like, if you don't have an established network, then you should have a stellar optimized LinkedIn profile, because you don't have that network to get you the job. To your point, yes, your resume. There's also, you can Google like how to ATS optimize your resume so that the bots can't just throw it out. Like, I work on little tweaks with my clients so that that doesn't happen. But if that's the first impression, they're going to look at your headshot, your banner, your headline, and your about section, if you're lucky. And people they have like the default image behind some people don't even have headshots, but they have like that default stuff. That screams to me, you don't care, right? You don't care. This is as good as you're going to put on, I mean, pay somebody to do it for you, a couple $100. There's Fiverr and Upwork. People will make it look amazing. But like, if you don't have the established network, then focus on LinkedIn. But ideally, you have both really polished.
I love that. I agree with everything you said. And I want to amplify one thing. I talk to a lot of veterans that are retiring or just getting out after 3 years and all of that. And they have started to become more in tune with how important LinkedIn is. Elizabeth, every one of my younger nieces and nephews, who are now 35 and younger, when I ask them in their 20s, late 20s, are you on LinkedIn? Some of them hadn't even heard of it. None of them had been on LinkedIn, but they were all on TikTok, Facebook, Instagram. And I said, listen, not having a LinkedIn profile that looks good. And I know what you're going to say. I don't have a resume, Uncle Mike. Do as good as you can. Get it up there. But if you don't have a LinkedIn profile today, it's no different than someone saying, give me your cell number. I don't have a cell phone. Could you imagine the impression that would give off in today's world? I don't have a cell phone. Now, I know some people as old as me or older that refuse to get a cell phone and a computer. And they just decided their era is over. But LinkedIn, the TikTok, Instagram, they're not going to get you a job unless you're Kardashian, an influencer. Then you can make $1 billion.
Yeah.
Good luck with that. Chances are you're not Kim Kardashian,
Right.
But the one is going to get you a job or help you get a job is LinkedIn.
Yeah.
So my bold statement to the folks listening out there is, even if you have a job now, get on LinkedIn and make it as professional as you can. And to your point, it means something to an employer. It means something to me when I go in and say, this guy doesn't have that many recommendations, but I'm looking and I can see he himself recommended 25 or 30 people.
Yeah.
His college coach, his high school coach, whatever. And he or she frequently likes, shares, and comments on somebody else's content. it shows me not only have a profile, but they are engaged in this leadership and employment arena that's out there. So I can't
Yeah.
too forcefully emphasize get on LinkedIn. It's the currency of the employment arena these days. Your thoughts?
It's free. It's free too. I mean, that's the thing. And I mean, they do have premium, but you can join some groups and actually negotiate a year free premium membership. Like I have a free membership through like the journalism group there, but there are certain groups that you can join, but it's free. It's really just, I tell people if you don't have a polished LinkedIn or an optimized LinkedIn, you are like a New York City cab with your light turned off. And then you're wondering why nobody's trying to get in. You know what I mean? Like you're a needle in a haystack. You are invisible. You are irrelevant. Like you have to spend a little bit of time on your LinkedIn, and everybody's like, "Oh, I hate social media and I don't want to." Well, you need to like dig a little deeper as to why you want to remain invisible. And I'll tell you, I have
Yeah.
so many women work with me and they're like, well, I don't want to list that as an accomplishment because I was part of a team that did it. It wasn't really me. And I go, right, but you were
Mhm.
part of that team and that's what got it done. So you can claim it. Like,
Yeah.
I think you really need to look at these people who don't want to look at their resume and they don't want to do LinkedIn. I feel like they're trying to hide a little bit. They probably have some insecurities, and it's better to understand that and work through it than to
Yeah.
just like kind of remain invisible and then be pissed off at the world because you don't have recruiters reaching out.
Yeah. I agree with that. Well, let's go down another lane here. Much of your work focuses on helping women flourish, and you share your robust experience and insights because I've never had this experience, never will. I've never been the only woman at the table, and you
Yeah.
have many
Yeah.
times. And so and so you're coaching a lot of women on situations they're going to face. It's not a matter of if, but when you're going to face this. Could be earlier, could be 10 years from now. So I'd like to get into this a little bit. What do you think? You're talking to men and women now on this podcast. What are some of the most common situations, really negative situations that women have to deal with in the workplace? I think they're negative. They're at least challenging that they're
Yeah.
going to have to do something to navigate them. Your thoughts?
I think the biggest thing is feeling, well, it's two things. It's feeling dismissed and then also feeling like a catch-all. So the dismissal piece can be you say something in a meeting and you're cut off. Like this happened to me. I don't know how many times. I would have an idea. I would get up the courage to say it at a table full of men, and they would cut me off mid-sentence, be like, yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh, yeah, I thought of that too. Yeah, we can do that. And then they would take it and kind of like run with it. And then I, number one, wouldn't get credit for the idea. And number two, just felt like I was stupid. Like it wasn't a good contribution. Like I remember I worked for this brand, Pirates Booty, and we were around a big board table and our CMO was there. And I said, I'm building these displays in these stores, right? Our distributor reps are building these end caps, if you will, right? Where they just take the cases of the snack food. And I said, I would love it if the boxes were pretty. Like, why can't we put the pirate, right, which was our mascot, on the box and make the boxes pretty so that we don't have to take the product out of the box and put it on a shelf because the boxes are ugly. And literally, they did that idea. They made these beautiful, artistic looking boxes. And at the national meeting 6 months later, our CMO claimed it as his idea. And it just really was like a gut punch because there were no other women there to kind of like vouch that was my idea. And it put me into a place of guard yourself, right? These are not people who are ever going to give you your dues. Be careful where you share ideas, try to document it somehow. So I wish that I would
Yeah.
have gone back in an email, like a recap. I always say to women, and goes for men too. This doesn't only happen to women. Like this happens
Right.
to everybody. But if you've spoken up in a meeting and it's an idea, write an email recap to everybody who was in that meeting. Here are the notes I took away. My suggestion
Yep.
is, right? And they still might not give you credit, but at least there's some documentation when it comes to a review time or something like that, like, hey, I spoke up. I think it's also really good if you see somebody being cut off, especially a woman of color or any sort of minority group, to say, hey, let her finish, or like stand up and say, I'm sorry to cut you off. What were you saying? Ben, can you wait a minute or whatever? I think that a lot of times we just allow people to kind of get railroaded. So you have to be an active ally. And then another thing that I would say for women is to really kind of get in this headspace of, if you don't feel valued and you've done everything that you feel like you can do to advocate for yourself, and you still don't trust that they're ever going to pay you what you feel like you're worth, or they're going to acknowledge you or give you the high visibility projects, it's likely time to move on. Because the beautiful thing, Mike, is that the landscape is changing. It's, you know what I mean? That being the only one at the table is getting less and less, which is wonderful.
Yeah.
So like that skincare brand that I worked for was women owned, women run. And it was a whole table of women. And so I felt like, okay, level playing field. So I think just like, don't be afraid to leave if you feel like you're never going to get the validation that you want.
Yeah, great points. And I want to say something. Let's see what your experience is relative to the young woman piping up and just basically shut up.
Yeah.
I have personally seen older women do that to young women.
Yes. Oh yeah.
And
They're usually very threatened.
Yeah. Where I'm going with this is I'm talking to the younger generations and the older generations, 67 years old. I'm pretty operationally sound. I've seen few leadership situations. There's few leadership situations I've not seen. And, I've been around a long time. So operationally, I can be prone. If left unchecked, I could just tell the guy, look, I know where you're going. Just do this. And so I don't do that, but I have to, because I know where he's going. I have the solution for it. He doesn't even know what question to ask yet. And so let's just get to it. What I'm saying is this: older folks, and I'm talking Gen Xers, the younger Gen Xers. Sometimes when you're 35, 38, you will look at the younger people in their 20s and say, yeah, just do it this way. You probably know more than them operationally, but you don't know their generation, and you don't know current trends and social media, appeal and things that they do. So younger people, I think they need to not tune out older people like, oh, what's this boomer talking about? He's got a knowledge of history, experience. You would be very, very remiss to just, because of his age, shut him out. And then older people, and I'm talking 35 and older now, you would be doing yourself a disservice and your company and your team if you just assume, what the hell's this college kid know? Well, he may have less than 1 year in corporate America, but he understands what commercials are on the web and on social media or whatever. He also understands the current generation's desire for work. So someone like that piping up on an HR intensive meeting could have valuable insights so that the 40, 50, and 60-year-olds don't automatically assume they know the fate and lot of the 20-year-olds in their company and write policies that the 20-year-old like, am I working in the 1950s here or what? I just said a lot, but I want to hear your thoughts on it.
It's respect. I mean, you either respect people or you don't, and in those meetings, and we're probably guilty of it with our spouses and our parents and our kids. It's like, oh yeah, you know what I mean? Or if you're saying something like, yep, got it. That is a dismissal, to your point. That is saying shut up without saying shut up. So is it worth it to give them the 10 or 30 seconds they need to finish their thought and say, totally agree. I'd like to add to that because I had the same thoughts, right? It's just respect. And I think, we're all vibrational, energetic beings, and you get what you put out. So either you're going to be a radiator for inclusiveness and valuing another human being, or you're going to be somebody who shuts people down so that you can try to dominate a conversation or get credit for something. And I think that's just a boomerang that's going to gain speed as it comes back at you. So even with my kids, I tell them, whatever you're putting out, it's like gonna catch some momentum and it's gonna come back. So if you're doing that in a meeting or on an email or whatever, it's the golden rule, right, Mike? It's like, I don't know. I think you either respect people or you don't.
Yeah, we're running out of time, and I want to ask you this question, Elizabeth. Everything you've talked about implies that women could really benefit from mentors. You know, I love working with women, always have. Love working. I love being a mentor to anybody. Somebody out there that's 35, 40 says, no, I could do that. I hear what Elizabeth and others are saying. I don't mean for that to happen in my company. I want to actually, you know, figuratively embrace these women and be a mentor. Anything less than 60 seconds you can tell us, how can someone step up and be more of a mentor and facilitator and enabler of women?
I think you can just kind of model it in your everyday life, right? So at work, it can be amplifying somebody's success in an email, running it up the flagpole, if you will, or just giving them a pat on the back, or calling them and saying, hey, I think you're doing a great job. And if you ever need somebody to help get a bigger client or get the ear of the CEO, let me know and I'm here for you. So I think you can start small. It doesn't have to be this formalized, we're going to meet every month and this is what we're going to talk about. I think you could just look around you and see who's either struggling or who is really coming in hot and doing a great job that you feel like you could help catapult. But just don't let some insecurity get
Yeah.
in the way of you being of service.
Yeah, well said. Well, we are out of time, Elizabeth. I can't let you out of here, though, without asking the classic question I ask everybody. If you were able to bring back one leader from the past, talk to that person, spend a day with them, who would you choose and why?
Well, it's got to be RBG for me. She is a photograph that I look at because if you do any sort of like research on her, she juggled so much while she was on her ascension to greatness. So I think we all struggle with work-life balance. And I think I would ask her, how she stayed so mentally strong through so many obstacles.
Yeah, well, a noteworthy choice, credible one. You're not the first that have chosen her, and well, what a role model in so many ways. We could do an entire podcast or 10 on her alone. So she's missed, that's for sure. How will people reach out to you? How can they find your book? How they find your business? How do they contact you?
Yeah, it's super easy. Everything's on my website, elizabethpearson.com. And then on social, I'm at coach.elizabeth.pearson.
Awesome. Well, listen, we didn't get to talk about everything we wanted to, Elizabeth. Selfishly, I would request, first of all, thanks for this. It's going to be a great episode. The audience is going to love it. Selfishly, I'd like you to consider coming back again, doing another one.
Of course. Love to.
We hope you've enjoyed this podcast. Please subscribe, rate, review, and recommend to your friends. Please visit our website at fidelisleadership.com and sign up for our leadership newsletter. Until next time, remember the words of the ancient Greek philosopher Pericles.
What you leave behind is not what is engraved in stone monuments, but is woven in the lives of others.